There are two mass protests that just happened over the weekend. One was very, very American, and the other not so much. Sadly, the former occurred thousands of miles away across the Pacific. The one that was very, very American was the one that was happening in Hong Kong. That one, Sunday, drew over 1.7 million people. This is a time lapse of the event, now making the 11th weekend the people of Hong Kong have taken to the streets. These numbers are insane on how big this is. And what's missing? Violence in the streets. You saw a little bit of it at the airport where they were spray painting things on the wall, and then what happened? The people pulled back and said, hey, we can't be like this. There's no violence, there's no destruction of property, nothing. How do you get nearly 2 million people to not do anything, much less raise a finger in anger? Because you know what really moves the needle with the world, and it's never violence. Let's contrast this event with what happened in Portland this weekend. There were about 1,000 protesters, 1.7 million, and 1,000 here. The counter-protesters went head-to-head with the protesters on Saturday at an event called End Domestic Terrorism this Sunday. It was organized by former InfoWars employee Joe Biggs. It was expected to be attended by far-right groups from all over the country, including several militia groups that signed on to attend. Biggs and a few others were in D.C. lobbying to help get Antifa designated as an organization of terror. That's probably the only thing that Biggs and I agree on. This event in Portland was supposed to be a giant spotlight on the extreme left's Antifa's brutality, and the campaign appeared to be working. The president tweeted early Saturday morning that he was watching and he was considering naming Antifa as an organization of terror. All that was needed now was that moment. In contrast to Hong Kong, this protest was looking and even really kind of hoping for violence. If there's any question at all to the motives here, I want to show you Biggs. This is a few weeks ago during a podcast interview describing what he expected to see when they marched into Portland.
What is your vision of what this event will look like?
I think one of two things can either happen. Either all-out war, which is, where, there's going to be some scraps and things like that, and it'll get a lot of media coverage, but of course we'll always look like but Antifa will learn a lesson, or they'll be the cowards that they are and not show up at all.
Either Antifa is not going to show up or it's going to be all-out war. They wanted blood in the streets, both sides did, but neither actually got what they came for. This time, surprisingly, the Portland PD actually did their job. They met the protester numbers with about 1,000 on hand, and they kept the two sides largely separated. Now, I want to think back to Hong Kong for a second. Nearly 2 million people, no violence. Portland, there's 1,000 people and 1,000 police officers. And they still couldn't make it through the day without trying to hurt one another and beating people up. This was a group of Antifa charging a bus, attempting to pull the occupants out while wielding a hammer. Doesn't seem like a problem. The man was maced and beaten unconscious. There were random scuffles like this, one throughout all of the day. At this point, I think everyone was just frustrated that the fight they were hoping for, that they were really promised, never actually materialized, and they were ready. This video shows a group of Antifa carrying black cases that contained cement projectiles, multiple other weapons that were confiscated by police. This is going to lead to a moment that could ignite the entire country on fire, because it'll be these groups of radicals that the majority of Americans, left or right, they don't agree with either of these. And what will happen? Something will happen, and Congress and the president or everybody else will get involved, and it will be used for political purpose. Oh my gosh, it's almost like a Reichstag fire moment. The media in Washington, D.C. are absolutely to blame for all of this. Just look at the coverage by every mainstream outlet today. From NBC News, quote, far-right rally in Portland meant by anti-fascist protesters. Really? You can say far-right, but you can't say far-left? Really? Or heaven forbid, the radical left? How about this one from the Associated Press? Quote, far-right and Antifa groups both claim victory in Portland. Why again can't you call Antifa radical or far-left? This is the entire reason the people that organized all of this marching organized it. And what did the media expect to happen? People on the right are being called racist, fascists, and bigots. And I mean everyone on the right. And while they watch their friends get beaten up in the streets, the media refuses to even call these black-clad thugs, let alone terrorists. They are radical leftists. The media's silence and spin has played a huge role in creating this monster. And to the politicians in D.C., what did you expect would happen when you started throwing around words like concentration camps? Seriously, I want to know. What did you think? Now, I know that the Squad? I know how radical they are. I know that they want to flip the country. They do. How do you think the radical left would respond? They knew. They knew exactly what would happen. And what did happen? Well, this. Last month, an Antifa member charged an ICE facility in Tacoma, throwing fire bombs and armed with a rifle. Why did he do it? We'll see if you can spot any familiar words from the very first paragraph of his manifesto. Quote, Evil says concentration camps for folks deemed lesser are necessary. And the handmaid of evil says the concentration camps should be more humane. Beware the centrist. So what are they talking about? Concentration camps. What are they warning against? Anyone who is saying, okay, calm down, both of you, calm down. Politicians, what did you expect would happen? Black Lives Matter activist Shaun King called the Antifa firebomber a martyr who is now arm in arm with John Brown. King went on, writing, quote, we cannot and should not wait until 2020 with the hope that we defeat Trump. Free these children. We should liberate them now by any means necessary. Now, here's a famous person saying, you could be famous too. I wonder, what did Shaun King expect would happen after saying those words? How did he think the radical left would respond? Well, we know now, 4 weeks later, 2 ICE facilities were shot at in San Antonio, Texas. The amount of violent activity over the past 4 weeks is absolutely insane. But we're talking about gun control now for the shooters on schools and campuses. We're talking now about the shooter in El Paso. He killed over 20 people, espousing talking points from both the right and the left. Everything for the need to universal health care, basic universal income, climate change, and immigration. Guess which one he was deemed, left or right? The extreme talk from both sides was clearly at the center of his thinking. You'd hope that Washington and the media might take a bit to just calm down for a minute and realize that maybe they're partly to blame here. Maybe they should tone it down some. Then we get people like former CNN host Reza Aslan. In one tweet, he equated all Trump supporters, all, to white nationalists and terrorists, and called for them to be, quote, eradicated. Can you imagine if I would have ever said, oh, by the way, we should liquidate all those supporters of Obama? Hello? Now, he wasn't suspended from Twitter, by the way. His tweet still on his timeline. How would a member of the radical left respond to words like these? We don't have to look. We saw the radical left with Stalin. We know what they did. Oh, and we saw the radical right, as people would define it here in America, which is wrong, with Hitler. They both have one thing in common: socialist totalitarianism. That's what they both have in common. Not the U.S. Constitution, not small government. We know the Dayton shooter was a radical leftist. We don't know about his motive yet. The guy was crazy, you have to be. But calling for the eradication of your political rivals really doesn't make people like the Dayton shooter less likely to shoot. What's next? All of this occurred in a month's time, and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and we are pushing towards a civil war, a war where the most radical from both sides engage in bloody insurgent warfare. I'm not a part of that. You're not a part of that. The only thing left before it all kicks off is a watershed moment that seemingly both sides on the left and the right are waiting for. And that way, the big government people on the left or the right can come down and make sure it stops. Gee, where have I heard that before? That's why events like this one in Portland over the last weekend are so dangerous. If you really want change, there is only one way to do it, and the perfect example was on Sunday in Hong Kong. After a few weeks of escalating violence, Hong Kongers decided to take to the streets and show the world that that's not who they are. Look at that. All they want is peace. You cannot advocate against violence with more violence unless you go to war. You can't call evil by doing evil yourself. Gandhi knew this. So did Martin Luther King. The only thing that extinguishes darkness is light. Both men, Martin Luther King and Gandhi, changed their countries and the world, but it would have never been possible if they resorted to violence. MLK is the way. For those of us who are not moderates, I am clearly I'm a radical constitutionalist, but I don't want to kill my neighbors. I don't want to kill people who are different than me. I don't care what side you're on. Do not get into the boat or find yourself swayed by the emotion of events. Don't do it. Otherwise, you go the way of Malcolm X. We cannot let emotion dominate our thinking. If we do, the cost will be our freedom.